A woman used her final dollars to feed 2 starving children. 15 years passed, and then a man in an expensive vehicle appeared at her home. The events that followed will amaze you beyond words. The quiet rumble of a motor disrupted the peace along Evergreen Drive. Danielle Morris stopped mid-stride, her palm hovering over her front gate's corroded handle. Slowly turning toward the noise, she felt her breathing falter. An elegant ebony vehicle, lengthy, refined, and mirror-bright in the July sunlight, came to rest directly before her humble single-story home. This wasn't typical for Wichita Falls, Texas, unless someone had lost their way. The dark-tinted glass prevented any view inside. Danielle's initial reaction, wrong house. Has to be. She cleaned her palms on her worn denim, leaving soapy streaks across her leg. Her pulse pounded like a broken rhythm in her head. The vehicle's door opened with a soft click, revealing a gentleman in a charcoal suit worth more than her yearly income. His footwear shone like mirrors. Adjusting his blazer, he turned and met her gaze directly. Briefly, she wondered if he might be an attorney bearing troubling news, or perhaps someone collecting debts. Danielle's abdomen contracted. Though she owed little, the pile of invoices on her kitchen counter revealed how financially strained recent times had been. Mrs. Morris. His tone remained composed, nearly tender, yet resonant enough to reach across the yard. Danielle blinked, clutching the gate as though it could ground her in familiarity. Yes, that's correct. Are we acquainted? The gentleman smiled, not the arrogant expression she anticipated, but something genuine, wistful even. He moved closer slowly, and momentarily Danielle felt the world shift beneath her. Something about his gaze, deep, unwavering, probing, stirred recognition in her mind's depths. Those eyes seemed familiar somehow. You likely won't recall me, he stated, his voice becoming gentler, almost worshipful. But I've waited years to see you once more. Danielle's throat went dry. Once more, she studied his features, attempting recognition, but found nothing. Neither the defined chin, nor the costly timepiece, nor the assured presence radiating from him like heat from pavement. Sir, I believe you might be. No, he interrupted, raising his hand. Not impolitely, just sufficiently to halt her words. You're why I stand here now, why my life has meaning. Danielle's forehead creased, bewilderment twisting her stomach tighter. How existence had been unremarkable. No major gambles, no significant victories. She labored. She settled accounts. She stayed unnoticed. What could this man possibly mean? Before she could reply, he smiled again, more deliberately this time, as if savoring something precious. 15 years back, he said, you nourished 2 starving children at a restaurant when no one else cared. Danielle's breath ceased. A memory fragment. Sticky booth seats, 2 small faces with wide, weary eyes, emerged like an aged photograph surfacing from depths. Her heartbeat faltered. Seeing understanding dawn in her expression, his smile broadened. Not ostentatious, but filled with overwhelming gratitude. I was one of those children, he said plainly. Danielle's legs nearly gave way. She gripped the gate tighter, steadying herself against the emotional surge. Shock, incredulity, and strange familiarity enveloped her like a cherished coat unworn for years. She swallowed with difficulty. You were that young boy. His acknowledgement came slowly, purposefully, and as she prepared to speak again, he indicated the vehicle at the curb. I didn't come merely to express gratitude, he said. I came because my debt to you exceeds imagination. Danielle's heart rate accelerated. She glanced at the car, then back at him. Her mouth opened soundlessly. Her stable, predictable world suddenly shifted completely. But how could one kind gesture from 15 years ago bring this man to her doorstep with such luxury? 15 years prior, Danielle Morris's world appeared entirely different. Then, life blurred with clattering dishware, ringing telephones, and the persistent scent of fryer grease that lingered in her hair despite countless washings. The Bluebird Diner occupied the corner of 8th and Main in Topeka, Kansas. A squat structure with peeling blue paint and neon signage that flickered during strong winds. Danielle had worked there since 19. Though unglamorous, It provided honest employment. She knew regular customers' names, their coffee preferences, and which ones attempted to leave without paying if unwatched. That evening had been quiet. The dinner patrons were long departed, and only the old ceiling fan's hum filled the vacant booths. Danielle cleaned the counter, humming softly when the door creaked open, admitting cool evening air. Looking up to offer her standard smile, she froze. 2 children stood inside, a boy and girl, perhaps 8 and 6. Their garments hung loose, faded, and threadbare from excessive washing, still unable to shed their grime. The boy's sneakers were torn at the seams, and the little girl gripped his hand so tightly her knuckles whitened. Danielle's heart tugged. Children that young shouldn't be out so late unaccompanied. "Hello there," she called gently, setting down her cloth. "You too lost?" The boy shook his head, eyes darting toward the seating area. He remained silent initially. Instead, he guided his sister to the far corner where they slipped into seats like phantoms, trying to remain invisible. Danielle frowned. Their movement, quiet, cautious, suggested this wasn't accidental. She gathered 2 menus and approached, her shoes squeaking on the linoleum. "Good evening, sweethearts," she said, maintaining lightness. "The kitchen remains open. Would you like food?" The little girl peered from behind her brother's arm, large brown eyes containing something Danielle couldn't identify. Not fear exactly, more like hope mixed with shame. The boy declined again, his voice barely audible. "Just water, please. Water alone." Danielle's chest constricted. "Are you certain?" she asked, noting their gaunt faces. "We have pancakes, hamburgers, pie, anything you'd enjoy." He hesitated, then looked away. "We lack money." His matter-of-fact delivery made her throat ache. Danielle stood momentarily, menus dangling, feeling something inside twist. She considered the $10 bill folded in her apron, her gas money home. She remembered her own childhood, nights sleeping hungry because her mother couldn't stretch dollars far enough. Danielle crouched to their eye level. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Caleb," he answered after pausing. "This is Hannah." "Well, Caleb and Hannah," Danielle said softly. "I think I can make an exception tonight." The little girl's eyes widened. "You can?" Danielle smiled. "Absolutely. How about grilled cheese and fries? Perhaps pie to share?" Hannah looked at her brother silently, seeking permission. Caleb bit his lip, then nodded once. "All right," he murmured. Danielle stood, keeping her voice cheerful despite her heavy heart. Coming up, she headed kitchenward, ignoring the stinging in her eyes. She'd pay personally. $10 didn't matter much. Fuel could wait. These children needed nourishment more than she needed a full tank. As the cook prepared bread on the griddle, Danielle glanced back at the corner booth. Caleb sat rigidly, shoulders squared like he bore burdens no child should carry. Hannah leaned against him, tiny and exhausted, eyelids drooping. Danielle didn't know their circumstances. She didn't inquire. She only knew they were hungry, and she could remedy that, at least temporarily. But she couldn't foresee that single decision would ripple through years yet unlived. Danielle carried the tray back, warm grilled cheese and golden fries aroma wafting through the air. 2 tall milk glasses sweated beside a cherry pie slice crowned with whipped cream. When she set the plates down, Hannah's eyes sparkled like fire in darkness. Caleb straightened, his expression torn between relief and guilt. Danielle kept her voice gentle. "Eat before it cools." Neither moved initially. Then Hannah reached tentatively for a fry, cautious as a day. She bit into it, and the smallest smile touched her lips. Caleb watched, then finally took half the grilled cheese. Danielle slid into the opposite seat without asking. She knew better than to hover like a server expecting payment. These children owed her nothing. Caleb chewed slowly, eyes flickering to her and away. Danielle waited patiently. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked like aged wood. You didn't need to do this." Danielle shrugged lightly, resting her chin on her hand. "Of course I did. You entered hungry. What kind of person would let you leave that way?" His jaw tightened as he stared at his plate as if answers lay hidden in the crumbs. "People do it constantly." That struck heavily. Danielle felt it settle like stone in her chest. She breathed slowly, watching Hannah nibble the sandwich as if it might vanish if consumed too slowly. "Not tonight," Danielle said gently. "Not while I'm here." Caleb's eyes snapped up, sharp and wary. "Why?" The question hung between them. Danielle considered briefly, then gave the only honest answer. "Because someone once helped me the same way," she said, "and it made a difference." Caleb blinked as if unsure how to process that. He looked at his sister, then back at Danielle, suspicion slowly softening. Hannah swallowed her sandwich's last bite and whispered, "Thank you." Those words nearly shattered Danielle's heart. Though quiet, they carried immense weight, as if the little girl rarely had reason to say them. Danielle reached across and brushed a crumb from Hannah's cheek. "You're welcome, sweetheart." Caleb didn't thank her yet, but his eyes conveyed enough. While they ate, Danielle asked simple questions. Nothing threatening. "Do you live nearby?" Caleb shook his head. "Just around. Someone waiting for you?" "No." The word was sharp, final. Danielle swallowed hard, suppressing more questions. She didn't want to frighten them. Still, the thought of these children alone outside twisted his stomach. "You're certain you're safe out there?" She tried again. Caleb's jaw set like stone. "We're fine." Danielle let it pass. Instead, she slid the pie plate toward them. "Sure," she said, smiling. Hannah's eyes widened at the bright red filling. "Cherry, best in town," Danielle said. The little girl's smile was pure sunshine in that dim corner. For the first time since entering, Caleb smiled too. Small and careful, as if he'd forgotten how. When the last crumbs disappeared, Caleb took Hannah's hand and stood. "We should leave." Danielle rose too, pulling 2 bills from her apron and sliding them under the plate before he could protest. "No charge," she said quickly, waving off his forming protest. His shoulders sagged. "We'll repay you someday." Danielle chuckled softly. "Sweetheart, this isn't a loan." But he nodded solemnly, like making a promise he intended to keep. Then he took Hannah's hand and led her doorward. She glanced back and waved with tiny fingers before the glass door closed behind them. Danielle stood there long after, staring where they'd been. She didn't know their surname, didn't know their destination. She only knew 2 hungry children had left with full stomachs. For tonight, that sufficed. She couldn't know it wouldn't just suffice. It would transform everything. But life didn't distribute happy endings overnight, and Danielle's story was far from complete. The diner door's swinging sound that night faded, but the memory of those children stuck like a thumbprint on Danielle's heart. For a while, she found herself glancing toward that corner booth during shifts, half hoping, half dreading to see them again. She never did. Days became weeks, weeks became years. Danielle reached 30, then 35, then 40. Life didn't improve, but it didn't worsen either. It simply continued. She remained in Topeka temporarily, working that same diner until its permanent closure. The owner wept when informing the staff. Chain restaurants had consumed all the small establishments like theirs. Danielle packed her apron into cardboard and drove home with a fist-sized throat lump. Bills continued arriving as always. Rent, utilities, the old sedan that coughed and rattled with each key turn. Danielle accepted shifts wherever possible. Cafes, truck stops, even a motel reception desk for a period. None paid well. There were evenings she sat at her kitchen table staring at a single dollar bill, wondering how far it could stretch. But Danielle was supremely stubborn. She never quit, never called it unjust. Life owed her nothing. That's what her mother used to say, and she believed it. She learned to make dollars scream before spending them. She repaired shoes with glue, wore thrift store jeans until knee frayed, and told herself it was acceptable. She wasn't resentful. If anything, she sought small joys wherever they fit. Sunrise after long shifts, strangers' laughter in lines, rain scent on hot pavement. Danielle expected nothing more. But deep down, on nights when the house creaked and silence pressed heavily, she wondered about those 2 children. Did they find homes? Did anyone love them enough to keep them secure? Or did life devour and discard them like so many others? Sometimes when dwelling too long on these thoughts, her chest knotted. Because part of her knew if they'd asked, if they'd stayed, she would have done anything to keep them safe. Anything. 15 years. That's how long it had been. 15 birthdays, 15 Christmas mornings, 15 years of clocking in and out, scraping by, living quietly. And then that car appeared. It was a scorching summer afternoon. Heat waves danced on pavement. Danielle had just returned from hanging laundry when she heard it. The slow, smooth purr of an engine outside. Not the sound of a beaten sedan or a rusty pickup like neighbors drove. No, this was different. Initially, she thought someone had made a wrong highway turn. Fancy cars didn't belong on her street. Not on Evergreen Drive, where chain-link fences sagged and children played basketball with milk crate hoops. Danielle stepped onto the porch, wiping sweat from her forehead. That's when she saw it. A car so shiny it appeared ink-dipped. Black rims, tinted windows. It stopped at the curb like a panther crouching in tall grass. For a heartbeat, Danielle simply stared, breath-catching. People like her didn't receive such visitors. The door swung open and a man emerged. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a suit tailored by angels. He turned, and when his gaze locked on hers, something inside Danielle shifted. Recognition lived in his eyes. Not just a stranger's polite smile, something deeper. Danielle felt her pulse stumble as he closed the car door and approached. But what could such a man possibly want with someone like her? The man stopped at her walkway's edge, shoes crunching on gravel. Up close, he appeared even sharper. Everything about him screamed success, the kind Danielle had only seen on television. His cufflinks caught sunlight. His tie was midnight-colored. Danielle gripped the porch railing to stop her hands from trembling. Mrs. Morris. His voice was steady, warm, but carried weight, as if he'd held this moment for ages. She nodded slowly, finding her voice. "That's me." He smiled faintly, and momentarily something about that smile tugged at deep memory threads, but her mind couldn't quite grasp them. "Do I know you?" she asked hesitantly, politely. The man tilted his head slightly as if the question wasn't surprising. "You knew me once, long ago." Danielle blinked. She searched his face, strong jaw, neat beard, eyes dark as polished stone, and found nothing. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice softening apologetically. "I don't remember." His smile widened fractionally. "That's fine. I wouldn't expect you to." Something in his delivery made her throat tighten. She wrapped her arms around herself, feeling suddenly small in her faded t-shirt and jeans. "Would you mind if I—" He gestured toward the porch, then stopped himself. "Actually, this might sound odd, but could we speak for a few minutes?" Danielle hesitated, a man in such a car appearing from nowhere requesting conversation. Every warning bell in her head rang. "What's this regarding?" she asked, her tone sharpening slightly. He took a slow breath, eyes never leaving hers. "It's about something you did 15 years ago." Danielle frowned, the words sliding through her brain without sticking. 15 years. He nodded once. "You were employed at the Bluebird Diner." And just like that, her breath caught. The Bluebird. God, she hadn't heard that name in years. She could almost smell the coffee and hear dishes clattering just from hearing it. Yes, she said slowly. "I worked there for years." The man's expression softened as if he'd been waiting for this moment, holding it like something fragile. "You don't remember me," he said gently. "But I remember you because that night you did something no one else did. You saw two children sitting in a corner booth with only water in their glasses, and you fed them." Danielle's knees weakened. She gripped the railing harder, pulse thundering in her ears. "Wait," she whispered. "Those children." The man nodded. "I was the elder one. My name's Caleb." The name struck her like a whisper from another lifetime. Danielle stared, her mind flashing back to a skinny boy with weary eyes and a little girl clinging to his side. Her voice cracked. "Oh my God, Caleb." He smiled then, not the polite, reserved smile from before, but something genuine, warm, filled with gratitude so deep it made her chest ache. "Yes," he said softly. "It's me." Danielle brought her hand to her mouth, stunned silent. She couldn't reconcile the memory of that fragile boy with a man before her now. Tall, confident, wealthy. I don't even know what to say," she murmured. "You don't need to say anything," Caleb replied, "because I didn't come here for words. Danielle blinked, her heart stuttering. Then why? Why are you here? He stepped closer, lowering his voice like sharing a secret. Because I owe you everything, and I've spent 15 years waiting for the chance to show you what that means. Danielle stared, her mind spinning painfully. But what could she possibly have done then to deserve something like this now? Caleb stepped onto the porch, moving with the same quiet confidence that had unsettled Danielle since he exited that car. She backed up slightly, giving him space. Her heart still raced, pounding so hard she felt it in her throat. "May I come in?" he asked gently. Danielle hesitated briefly, then nodded. "Yes, certainly." Inside, her home was small and simple. Worn sofa, faded curtains, coffee's faint scent in the air. Danielle suddenly felt self-conscious, as if the floor scuffs and mismatched chairs were screaming at him. But Caleb seemed oblivious. He lowered himself into the old armchair as if it were a throne. Danielle sat across from him, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles whitened. "So, explain to me. What's happening?" Caleb leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I've been searching for you for years," he said quietly. "I didn't know your surname initially. All I remembered was your face and that your name was Danielle. I searched every way possible. And when I finally located you," he smiled faintly, "I knew I had to come personally." Danielle shook her head slowly, still trying to comprehend. "Caleb, I gave you a meal. That's all. It was nothing." His eyes sharpened. "No, it was everything." Danielle blinked. "You have no idea what that night meant," Caleb continued. His voice remained calm, but something underneath was raw, like a reopened scar. "We hadn't eaten in 2 days. 2 days, Danielle. I was trying to care for Hannah, and I was just a child myself. I didn't know where else to turn. That diner was the last place I thought anyone would care." Danielle felt her throat tighten as his words sank in. Caleb's gaze dropped momentarily, his voice softening. "When you brought that plate to the table and the pie, it wasn't just food. It was hope. It was someone saying you matter. And when you said it wasn't alone," he looked up again, eyes shining, "that stayed with me. I promised myself that night that if I ever got the chance, I'd repay you tenfold." Danielle swallowed hard, her eyes burning. She wanted to speak, but the throat lump wouldn't let her. "I bounced around after that," Caleb said, leaning back. "Foster homes, group shelters. It wasn't easy, but I kept working. I studied. I refused to let that night be the last time someone believed in me. Eventually, I built something." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a slim envelope, placing it on the coffee table between them. Danielle stared at it as if it might attack her. "What's that?" "Your future," Caleb said simply. Her hands trembled as she slid the envelope closer and opened it. Inside was a check. Initially, her brain didn't process the numbers. Too many zeros lined up neatly. When it registered, her breath left in a sharp gasp. "Caleb, No, I can't accept this." "You can," he said firmly. "And you will, because this isn't charity. It's a promise I made 15 years ago, a promise to give back to the person who gave when she didn't have to." Danielle pressed her hand to her chest, shaking her head. This is excessive, Caleb. I gave you a sandwich and some pie. And that sandwich kept 2 children alive another day," he cut in, his tone steady but charged with emotion. "Don't you dare minimize that." Danielle blinked back tears, her vision swimming. I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Caleb said softly. She laughed, a broken, disbelieving sound, and wiped her cheeks. "Yes," she whispered. The late afternoon light slanted through thin curtains, painting the living room in soft gold. Danielle sat frozen, fingers still curled around the envelope as if it might disappear if released. Outside, the luxury car gleamed at the curb, its polished surface reflecting the sun. For the first time in years, she didn't feel Bill's weight pressing like a hand on her chest. For the first time in years, she could breathe. Caleb stood near the door, phone in hand. "I'll call Hannah," he said. "If she answers, I'll bring her tomorrow. She needs this." "Needs you?" Danielle swallowed hard, throat tight. "I'm frightened," she admitted softly. He stepped closer, crouching to their eye level. Don't be. Just speak to her like you did then. That night, you gave her something she'd never had before. A reason to believe somebody cared. Danielle's eyes burned. She nodded, voice barely a whisper. I'll try. Caleb smiled and squeezed her shoulder gently. That's all you've ever done, Danielle. And look what it began. She let out a shaky laugh, wiping her cheeks. I never thought anyone would remember something like that. I remembered, Caleb said firmly. Every single day. You planted something that night, a seed. And even when life tried to destroy it, I held on because you made me believe there was goodness out there. Danielle bit her lip, fighting another tear wave. You don't know what this means to me, Caleb. You really don't. He shook his head. No, Danielle, you don't know what you mean to me. To Hannah, this isn't just gratitude. It's full circle. For a long moment, silence filled the room. Not heavy, not tense, just full. Full of everything words couldn't contain. Finally, Caleb slipped keys from his pocket and laid them gently on the table. Drive it whenever you want or never. Doesn't matter. Just know it's yours. Danielle stared at them, blinking hard. What if I don't know how to live like this? What if I ruin it? Caleb smiled, his voice steady. You lived 15 years on scraps and hope. I think you'll figure this out just fine. A soft laugh escaped her, and for the first time in what felt like forever, it wasn't bitter or tired. It was real. As Caleb headed for the door, he turned back one last time. Tomorrow. Danielle nodded slowly. Tomorrow. The door clicked shut behind him, leaving Danielle in her little house's quiet. A house that suddenly felt too small for the future stretching ahead. She looked down at the check in her lap, then at the keys glinting in golden light, and whispered to the empty room, her voice breaking. Thank you. God. Thank you. Outside, the car's engine purred softly as Caleb drove away, the sound fading into distance, like one chapter's ending and another's beginning. Sometimes the smallest gestures, ones we barely notice, carry the greatest weight. A sandwich, a slice of pie, a kind word. You never know who's watching, who's holding on to that moment like a lifeline. And maybe years later, that kindness returns to you in ways you could never imagine. If you're reading this, let this story remind you. Kindness costs nothing, but it transforms everything. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs hope today. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories like this one. Your one click might inspire another act of kindness that changes a life.